One introduction RAWSEP view: the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view: purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXYi October 10th, 2025 Be smoke-free and help your pets live longer, healthier lives. In Webisode 57DHXYi, the United States Food and Drug Administration FDA, Be smoke-free and help your pets live longer, healthier lives. 2 Lost Science in America. 3 RAWSEP, view synopsis of headlines most relevant to RAWSEP October 8th to 10th, 2025. 4 headlines main content. 1. The United States Food and Drug Administration FDA, Be smoke-free and help your pets live longer, healthier lives. RAWSEP view. This FDA article is about tobacco smoke, so these adverse effects on pets are different from any wood smoke adverse effects on pets. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Animal health literacy. What can smoking do to my pets? What can smoking do to my dog? What can smoking do to my cat? What can smoking do to my pet bird? What can smoking do to my pet fish? One study showed that even when homes of smokers were cleaned and prepared for sale, third-hand smoke was still present in the dust and on household surfaces months after someone had last smoked in the homes. What can smoking do to my pets? Scientists are investigating the effects of tobacco smoke on pets, but the amount of information available is small compared to the amount available about the effects of smoking in people. Still, the information we do have is important and sheds some light on what happens to pets exposed to secondhand and third-hand smoke. What can smoking do to my dog? For dogs that already have breathing or lung issues, inhaling tobacco smoke can worsen their symptoms, and chronic coughing dogs can develop changes in their airways and lungs that are like those found in people who smoke. Ultra-fine smoke particles can activate the immune system of people. A type of white blood cell in the lungs involved in this immune response is called an alveolar macrophage. Alveolar macrophages watch what comes into the lungs, and if they detect something abnormal, they phagocytize or eat it to get rid of it. People who smoke therefore have an increased number of alveolar macrophages because their bodies are trying to get rid of all the tobacco smoke particles in their lungs. Dogs exposed to tobacco smoke also have an increased number of alveolar macrophages, some of which contain black smoke particles, likely for the same reason. How tobacco smoke affects a dog depends on the length of the nose of the dog. Why? Because noses are big. Air filters the hair and mucus in your nose, and the mucus in your sinuses act like glue traps. They trap particles like dust, pollen, and tobacco smoke and keep them out of your lungs. Bigger noses therefore will trap more particles. This holds true especially in dogs. Long-nosed dog breeds like Greyhounds, Borzois, and Doberman Pinschers that are exposed to tobacco smoke have a doubled risk of nose cancer. Their noses filter out a lot of inhaled tobacco smoke particles which stay trapped in their noses, so less get into their lungs. Unfortunately, this puts the tissues inside the nose and sinuses in contact with a lot of toxic cancer-causing particles, leading to the increased risk of nose cancer. Short and medium-nosed breeds like Pugs, Bulldogs, Beagles, and Brittany Spaniels have a higher risk of lung cancer. Why? Because their noses are much shorter. Fewer tobacco smoke particles get filtered out and more go directly into the lungs. Those ultra-fine particles like to go deep into the lungs, leading to the increased risk of lung cancer. Back to the top. What can smoking do to my cat? Cats are careful groomers, which keeps them looking beautiful, but grooming can be a bad thing for cats living in a smoking household. Cats breathe in secondhand smoke directly, just like dogs, when cats groom themselves, though they also ingest third-hand smoke particles that fall onto their fur. Studies show that cats living in smoking households have a 2 to 4 times increased risk of an aggressive type of mouth cancer called oral squamous cell carcinoma. The cancer is often found under the base of the tongue, where the third-hand smoke particles tend to collect. After grooming of the cats that develop oral squamous cell carcinoma, less than 10% will survive 1 year after diagnosis, even if they have had chemotherapy, surgery, or radiation treatment. Microscopic view of cat oral squamous cell carcinoma tumor. Cats that live with people who smoke more than 1 pack of cigarettes a day have 3 times the risk of developing lymphoma, a cancer of the immune system of the body similar to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In people, the typical survival time of a cat with lymphoma, even with chemotherapy or surgery, is 6 months. What can smoking do to my pet bird? Birds are very sensitive to air pollution, especially tobacco smoke. They can develop changes to their respiratory system similar to those seen in children exposed to tobacco smoke. Birds that live in a smoking household breathe in secondhand smoke, and like cats, birds like to groom or preen themselves when they do, so they ingest third-hand smoke particles that have coated their feathers. Birds are also exposed to third-hand smoke by perching on the clothes or hands of their owners and absorbing the harmful particles through their feet, or by preening the hair of their owner and ingesting the particles. Birds that live with smokers can develop irritated sinuses, pneumonia, allergies, lung cancer, feather plucking, eye problems, skin abnormalities, heart problems, and or fertility problems. Some of these conditions like pneumonia, lung cancer, and heart problems can cause death. Other conditions like allergies and feather plucking can be difficult to treat if the bird is not removed from the smoky environment. 2 Lost Science in America. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times Climate Newsletter October 10, 2025. By most metrics, 2025 has been the worst year for the American scientific enterprise in modern history since January. The Trump administration has made deep cuts to the science funding in America, including more than $1 billion in grants to the National Science Foundation, which sponsors much of the basic research at universities and federal laboratories, and $4.5 billion to the National Institutes of Health. Thousands of jobs for scientists and staff members have been terminated or frozen at these and other federal agencies, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the National Park Service. To thousands of researchers, veteran scientists, and new grad students at state universities and Ivy League institutions alike, these sweeping reductions translate as direct personal losses. Each may mean a layoff, a shuttered lab, a years-long experiment or field study abruptly ended, graduate students turned away, lost knowledge, lost progress, lost investment, lost stability, dreams deferred or foreclosed. This government upheaval is discouraging to all scientists who give their time and lend their brilliance to solve the problems beleaguering humankind instead of turning to some other activity that makes a more steady living. Gina Poe, a neuroscientist at the University of California, Los Angeles, wrote, in an email next year looks to be worse. The 2026 budget proposed by the White House would slash the National Science Foundation by 56.9%, the NIH by 39.3%, and NASA by 24.3%, including 47.3% of the NASA science research budget. It would entirely eliminate the U.S. Geological Survey, $299 million budget for ecosystems research, all U.S. Forest Service research, $300 million, and at the NOAA Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, all funding $625 million for research on climate habitat conservation and air chemistry, and for studying ocean, coastal, and Great Lakes environments. The Trump administration has also proposed shutting down NASA and NOAA satellites that researchers and governments around the world rely on for forecasting weather and natural disasters. The American Association for the Advancement of Science has estimated that if the administration succeeds in its plans to cut the 2026 federal science budget to $154 billion from $198 billion, a 25% reduction, it would represent the smallest amount that the federal government has spent on science in this century. The result would essentially end the long-standing role of America as the world leader in science and innovation. A senior vice president for government relations and public policy at the Association of American Universities said in July the Times has been asking dozens of scientists from across the country to describe what has been lost as a result of these changes. Their first-person accounts for this series, which you can read here, will appear regularly over the coming weeks, including in this newsletter. Has your scientific work been cut? We want to hear about it. Our emphasis was primarily on heat in cities which are getting hotter, not just because of climate change, but because of infrastructure which creates an urban heat island effect. Fundamentally, we were trying to learn about these systems to prevent people from dying unnecessarily from heat, said a professor of atmospheric science at Northern Arizona University. Gurney had grants to build greenhouse gas monitoring systems around 3 American cities. With this grant, I also wanted to understand which time window of exposure is most important for menstrual health, prenatal, childhood, or adult. Our early results showed that the first trimester of pregnancy is a time to be especially concerned about air pollution and temperature, said an associate professor of environmental, reproductive, and the health of women at the Harvard School of Public Health. She had a federal research grant to study how air pollution can affect fertility in women. The Trump energy cuts punished mostly blue states. Red states might be next. The cancellation by the Energy Department of $7.5 billion in Biden-era awards for clean energy projects is poised to cause significant job losses and disruptions. Leaders of several states have said, even as internal documents suggest, that the agency may be contemplating deeper cuts in the months ahead. The Energy Department termination of more than 24 grants in New York State alone would threaten more than 1,000 jobs and nearly $500 million in investments in the state, according to figures compiled by the office of Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat. At the same time, many lawmakers and companies fear that the Energy Department could soon cancel even more funding, including for projects in Republican-led states, such as funding for 2 large projects in Louisiana and Texas that aim to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. In one chart, a horizontal bar chart of the cost to drive 100 miles with bars for electric cars, gas car, hybrid gas car, standard, and electric car fast charging. The New York Times how much it costs to drive an EV and a gas car. In every state, a writer compared the costs of filling up a gas-powered car with the cost of charging an electric vehicle. Charging an EV battery is usually cheaper than going to the gas pump, but it depends on where you live. Driving 100 miles in a typical gas car that gets 25 miles per gallon costs about $13 on average. In an EV, you would pay just $5 if you recharged at the average home electricity rate, which is cheaper than stopping at a fast charging station. Ruins of hillside homes overlooking the Pacific Ocean under hazy smoke-filled skies depict the destruction from wildfires. Free RAWSEP View synopsis of headlines most relevant to RAWSEP October 8th to 10th, 2025. United States RAWSEP View vaccine disinformation and misinformation from RFK Jr. is working to combat this misinformation. There is a university-linked organization called University of Minnesota Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy SIDRAP. From the article headline, New poll. Public confidence in CDC for vaccine advice tumbles. SIDRAP 1 in the United States. Renewables edge out coal in what is viewed by some as a turning point. RAWSEP interjects that if renewables counted here include dirty renewables such as the dirty industrial wood burning and the dirty indoor residential wood burning, then air pollution emissions will increase rather than decrease. Wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel. Coal wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel. Natural gas burning. These statistics are from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. 2 United States energy costs. The Trump energy cuts punished mostly blue states. Red states might be next. 3 California RAWSEP View Governor Newsom cuts in line ahead of RFK Jr. From the article headline, California will ban certain ultra-processed foods in schools. 4 California wildfires. Arrest made in Palisades fire in Los Angeles. 5 California energy and housing costs cut. California renters will not have to buy their own fridge under new law. 6 generations job cuts. Artificial intelligence. Gen Z faces job apocalypse as global firms prioritize AI over new hires. Report says technology sector. 7 government shutdown. Government shutdown persists as senators leave Washington. October 10th, 2025. 8 New Jersey energy costs and clean energy in the New Jersey race for governor. Energy costs have become a central issue. 9 New Jersey race for governor. Energy costs are one key moment. Key moments from the final New Jersey debate in the race for governor. 10 RFK Jr. California RAWSEP View ultra-processed food ban brought first by Democrats stealing any thunder from RFK Jr. Healthy food is not a Republican issue. Distraction from RFK Jr. Denial of vaccines foiled by California Governor Gavin Newsom. From the article headline, California to become first U.S. state to phase out ultra-processed foods from school meals. 11 RFK Jr. vaccine denial. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices ACIP panel at the Center for Disease Control CDC announces plans to assess childhood vaccines. RAWSEP interjects here that this means that proven science will be criticized with non-scientific arguments from an unqualified panel that does not rely on science. For its findings, 12 RFK Jr. vaccine denial with no evidence. RFK Jr. ties Tylenol use after circumcision to autism. 13 Trump energy dirty energy and energy costs opinion. The Trump bump on your energy bills. 14 Trump Epstein fallout. Government shutdown inside the Capitol. A heated spat over the shutdown and Epstein. 15 Utah Democrats. The redistricting fight. You have not heard about RAWSEP interjection. Utah may gain Democratic seats under a new redistricting plan. 16 Science climate loss. Science October 9, 2025. RAWSEP interjection. See excerpted Article 2 above. 17 Tobacco smoke. Control. Be smoke free and help your pets live longer, healthier lives. FDA October 8, 2025. RAWSEP interjection. See excerpted Article 1 above. 18 Trump cuts rural access to internet. RAWSEP view Trump actions denying service to rural areas can continue even during a government shutdown. From the article headline, Trump called Digital Equity Act racist. Now internet money for rural Americans is gone. 19 Trump cuts to rural healthcare. Rural health radar October 9, 2025. 20 Wisconsin conservationist former legislator Fred Clark announces run for 7th congressional seat. 21 Brazil Trump ally in prison past President Bolsonaro of Brazil was convicted, but the military appetite for a coup lingers. 22 Colombia Trump Venezuela war side affect Colombian president says boat bombed by the U.S. was carrying Colombians. 23 United Kingdom environmental conference which addresses air pollution emissions. RAWSEP view. Although wood-burning emissions are erased from climate goals for all nations in the world based on the scientifically debunked theory of carbon neutrality of wood-burning, could COP30 in 2025 recognize mitigation of wood-burning emissions as part of climate goals? From the article headline, Prince William to attend COP30 UN Climate Summit in Brazil. COP30 24 China solar energy. Why China built 162 square miles of solar panels on the highest plateau in the world. 25 China rare earth for battery storage clamps down even harder on rare earth exports. 4 headlines. The New York Times October 10, 2025. Arctic climate change curious. Reindeer and charging polar bears. The changing wildlife at the top of the earth. The New York Times artificial intelligence harm opinion. The AI prompt that could end the world. The New York Times bullies Republicans. Influencers bring back bullying. Online provocateurs say they are done with sensitivity. The New York Times government shutdown persists as senators leave Washington. The New York Times government shutdown opinion. 3 writers try to make sense of the government shutdown. The New York Times government shutdown. Republican RAWSEP view disinformation and misinformation. From the article headline, opinion. Democrats are increasing inequality. The New York Times government shutdown. During the government shutdown, the U.S. Senate passes bipartisan $925 billion defense policy bill. The New York Times nature and science bats catch migratory birds and eat them in midair. The New York Times New York City crime. RAWSEP view. Unprovoked. From the article headline, man charged with fatally beating 64-year-old at subway station. The New York Times New York City mayoral race. Mamdani maintains 13-point lead as Cuomo gains ground after the Adams exit. The New York Times Republicans disinformation. Supreme Court. Alex Jones asks Supreme Court to halt $1.4 billion payment to Sandy Hook families. The New York Times Republicans influencers how right-wing influencers are shaping the guard fight in Portland. The New York Times South Dakota housing poverty. Tiny homes aim to address shortage on Lakota reservation. The New York Times Trump Homan fallout opinion. I investigated corruption. The Homan affair is full of red flags. The New York Times Trump lawsuits against personal enemies. How Letitia James, now indicted, will stay as the Attorney General of New York. The New York Times Trump Supreme Court opinion. The Constitution does not belong to Trump or the Supreme Court. The New York Times Peru oust president amid crime surge. The New York Times Venezuela Maduro offered the U.S. the riches of his nation to avoid conflict. The New York Times Venezuela meet the woman Machado leading the Venezuela opposition to Maduro. The New York Times Venezuela, the Machado Nobel Peace Prize is latest Nobel honor for female democracy campaigners. The New York Times Venezuela, who is Maria Corina Machado, the winner of the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize? The New York Times French domestic instability has weakened its diplomatic clout. The New York Times Germany, the German top economist charts a path out of the crisis of Europe. The New York Times Israel opinion, a one-side peace plan still gives Palestinians hope. The New York Times Israel, during U.S. government shutdown, U.S. to send 200 troops to Israel in support roles. The New York Times Iran lures transgender foreigners for surgery but forces operations on locals. The New York Times Cameroon opinion, Cameroon is enthralled to a 92-year-old man. The New York Times China, why China built 162 square miles of solar panels on the highest plateau in the world. The New York Times headlines. The New York Times October 9, 2025. United States business computer chips, the Intel big bet inside the make or break factory of the Intel chip maker. The New York Times United States crime fighter Joseph Herbert, who helped catch copycat Zodiac killer, dies at 68. The New York Times California will ban certain ultra-processed foods in schools. The New York Times California race for governor Democrat Katie Porter goes viral for unhappy TV interview in the race for California governor. The New York Times consumers reading novels. What is dark academia? The New York Times Democrats influencers True Anon, the Lefty podcast takes listeners down rabbit holes. The New York Times government shutdown, Democratic alarm over an unbound Trump fuels shutdown standoff. The New York Times government shutdown scrambles some home sales in flood zones. The New York Times human interest lie about your age, it is fun. The New York Times New Jersey energy costs and clean energy in New Jersey race for governor energy costs have become a central issue. The New York Times New Jersey former New Jersey U.S. Senator jailed, but associate is not jailed. Star witness in Menendez bribery case avoids prison time. The New York Times New York City housing, who can afford 3 kids in New York City? The New York Times New York City, where street parking is free but comes at a cost. The New York Times Oklahoma Republican, the Oklahoma Republican governor criticizes National Guard deployment. In Chicago, the New York Times Public Broadcasting Corporation raising money. The Bob Ross Happy Little paintings will be auctioned. The New York Times Republicans influencers RAWSEP view violates separation of church church, and state, and views seem oppressive. To the average voter from the article headline opinion, he believes America should be a theocracy. He says his influence is growing. The New York Times Texas fossil fuel magnate Oscar S. Wyatt Jr. Wiley Texas oil man is dead at 1:01. The New York Times Texas High Court halts execution in shaken baby case. The New York Times Trump energy dirty energy and energy costs opinion. The Trump bump on your energy bills. The New York Times Trump versus the Fed. John Williams of the New York Fed favors more rate cuts. The New York Times Trump Supreme Court opinion. Should we call it the Roberts Court or the Trump Court? The New York Times Utah Democrats. The redistricting fight. You have not heard about the New York Times Haiti number of children fleeing violence in Haiti. Source the New York Times Finland deal with Trump. The Trump live updates government shutdown Finland deal and more. News. The New York Times United Kingdom Manchester synagogue attacker pledged allegiance to ISIS. Police say. The New York Times Ukraine. Even during a U.S. government shutdown, the U.S. Army race to catch up in a world of deadly drones. The New York Times Ukraine Russian aggression opinion. Radoslav Sikorsky. Putin is escalating his war. The New York Times Israel world leaders express hope and relief after Gaza deal. The New York Times Azerbaijan Russian aggression against 10 months later. Russia admits deadly downing of Azerbaijani plane. The New York Times China business computer chips a mystery CEO and billions in sales. Is China buying banned NVIDIA chips? The New York Times China clamps down even harder on rare earth exports. The New York Times China medicine and science. Chinese surgeons perform first pig to human liver transplant. The New York Times headlines. The New York Times October 8, 2025 business CEOs take two. Why big companies are naming CEOs. The New York Times California energy and housing costs cut. California renters will not have to buy their own fridge under new law. The New York Times California wildfire. What caused the Palisades fire? The site of the ignition point holds clues. The New York Times California wildfires. Arrest made in Palisades fire in Los Angeles. The New York Times California wildfires. What ignited the most destructive fires in California? The New York Times Democrat Joan Kennedy, who married into a dynasty, dies at 89. The New York Times energy costs. Clean energy more popular than dirty energy. Early signs of a turning point as renewables edge out coal. The New York Times Geniuses MacArthur Foundation announces 2025 Genius Grant winners. The New York Times government shutdown opinion. An ideological revolution needs 12 years in power. The New York Times government shutdown opinion. Trump 2.0 is the worst moments of America. Repeated redux. The New York Times government shutdown opinion. What civil society can do to beat Trumpism. The New York Times government shutdown. These Democrats could hold the key to ending the shutdown. The New York Times government shutdown. The Trump energy cuts punished mostly blue states. Red states might be next. The New York Times government shutdown. Trump fires black officials from an overwhelmingly white administration. The New York Times Illinois and Oregon National Guard live updates. Courts hear challenges to Chicago and Portland deployments. The New York Times Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has had it with Democrats who will not stand up to Trump. The New York Times Illinois Supreme Court to consider Illinois mail and balloting lawsuit. The New York Times Illinois Trump versus Illinois Democratic leaders. Trump says Chicago mayor and Illinois governor should be jailed amid National Guard tensions. The New York Times Music. The Taylor Swift The Life of a Showgirl has already sold 3.5 million. Beating Adele. The New York Times New Jersey key moments from the final debate in the New Jersey governor race. The New York Times New Jersey race for governor energy costs. One key moments from the final debate in the race for New Jersey governor. The New York Times New York City labor strike threat. Broadway could face a strike this fall. Here is what to know. The New York Times New York City nature opinion. Green spaces for kids should not be political. The New York Times pets in a toxic world. Pets could be vital health watchdogs. The New York Times RFK Jr. vaccine denials opinion. Parents, doctors, and vaccines for children. The New York Times Stephen Miller cited plenary authority, then paused. Conspiracies started flying. The New York Times RAWSEP question. What is plenary authority? Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian October 10, 2025 plenary authority is power that is wide-ranging, broadly construed, and often limitless for all practical purposes. It is most often applied to legislative bodies, as when government chooses to levy a tax or expend revenue. Lawmakers do not need to refer to the courts or a higher federal power for authorization to act when they have plenary authority over a matter. What was Stephen Miller referring to when discussing plenary authority? Miller had just been asked a question about the Trump legal authority to deploy federalized National Guard troops. The Stephen Miller initial response was to cite Title 10 of the federal code, and then to assert that this gives the president plenary authority to direct those troops as he sees fit. Title 10 is the general military law of the armed forces. While it does not use the term plenary authority or plenary power, the administration relies on its text to assert wide-ranging authority to use the military. The executive also relies on Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which states the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states. When called into the actual service of the United States, does the president actually have plenary authority over the military? Not really. Tennessee run for Congress. Democrat Justin Pearson. Tennessee 3 Democrat to run for Congress. The New York Times Texas governor blue state deployment shred relations between governors. The New York Times Trump blunders fallout. Artificial intelligence masked Trump actions. Fallout opinion. The AI boom is masking the Trump policy blunders. The New York Times Trump Epstein fallout. Government shutdown inside the Capitol. A heated spat over the shutdown and Epstein. The New York Times Trump versus Federal Reserve. Mixed economic signals stoke divisions at Fed minutes. Show the New York Times Trump Homan fallout. Tom Homan was said to have received $50,000 from agents. He may not have to return it. The New York Times Trump Kash Patel fallout from firing FBI agents. Kash Patel fires 2 FBI agents who worked on Trump investigation. The New York Times Trump lawsuits against personal enemies. Comey pleaded not guilty. The New York Times Trump lawsuits against personal enemies. The Comey 2 legal challenges to his indictment. Explain. The New York Times Trump lawsuits versus personal enemies. James Comey, former FBI director, to appear in court for arraignment. The New York Times Trump lawsuits versus personal enemies. Rutgers expert on Antifa flees to Spain after receiving death threats. The New York Times Canada Nature, the Toronto subway deer enigma unmasked with DNA analysis. The New York Times, Colombia, Trump, Venezuela war side effect. Colombian president says boat bombed by U.S. was carrying Colombians. The New York Times, Caribbean Republicans, Trump war with Venezuela affecting Colombia. GOP in Congress block bid to halt the Trump attacks in the Caribbean. See the New York Times. United Kingdom at the UK Conservative Party conference. Tories wonder about their future. The New York Times, Europe response to Trump tariffs. EU proposes 50% steel tariffs, a move to counter Chinese imports. The New York Times, France holds its breath over last-ditch talks for a government deal. The New York Times, Israel-Hamas deal paves way for Gaza ceasefire. Live updates. The New York Times, Israel hostages. Who are the hostages believed alive in Gaza? The New York Times, Israel, Trump says Israel and Hamas reach hostage deal. Live updates. The New York Times, Qatar pushes U.S.-Venezuela diplomacy as Trump focuses on military action. The New York Times, Nepal, how the Nepal Gen Z revolution spiraled out of control. The New York Times headlines. The Guardian, October 10, 2025, Arizona Democrat Grijalva. Why is the Republican U.S. House Speaker refusing to seat an elected Democrat? Moira Donegan. The Guardian, government shutdown. Stephen Miller is the most dangerous man in the Trump administration. Judith Levine. The Guardian movie The Woman in Cabin 10 review. Silliness of Keira Knightley mega yacht thriller tips at Overboard Movies. The Guardian movies is being a Guardian reporter as exciting as the movies make out? The Woman in Cabin 10 movies. The Guardian music. Moody blues singer and bassist John Lodge dies aged 82. Music. The Guardian, Trump Kirk fallout. U.S. professors facing threats, firings, and harassment over Charlie Kirk post. U.S. universities. The Guardian, Trump lawsuits against personal enemies. Letitia James accuses Donald Trump of weaponizing U.S. justice system after her indictment. U.S. politics live. Venezuelan politician Maria Corina Machado wins Nobel Peace Prize. Nobel Peace Prize. The Guardian, France art. Get Cartier. How Jean Nouvel turned an old Paris department store into a museum to rival the Louvre architecture. The Guardian, Israel Palestinians begin journey to the Gaza North as Israel says ceasefire now in effect. Live headlines. The Guardian, October 9, 2025, artificial intelligence and voting. We research AI election threats. Here is what we need to prepare for. Samuel Woolley and Dean Jackson. The Guardian, banking head of largest U.S. bank warns of risk of American stock market crash. J.P. Morgan. The Guardian, California wildfire man charged with starting Palisades fire to remain jailed. Federal magistrate says California wildfires. The Guardian, climate change heat deaths. Americans are dying from extreme heat. Autopsy reports do not show the full truth. Extreme heat. The Guardian, consumers food preparation, simple menu, minimal stress. Banging playlist. Top chef's tips for a dinner party. Even the host will enjoy food. The Guardian, consumers Halloween pumpkin carving. I carved until my fingers bled inside the baffling world of pumpkin obsessives. Halloween. The Guardian, games consume me. Review anything but empty calories. Games. The Guardian, games, the nonprofit helping people from all over the world to become successful game developers. Games. The Guardian, generations job cuts. Artificial intelligence. Gen Z faces job apocalypse. Global firms prioritize AI over new hires. Report says technology sector. The Guardian, government shutdown. Republicans mocktails for MAGA. Why the U.S. right is turning sober. U.S. politics. The Guardian, government shutdown. Republican Trump says we are only going to cut Democrat programs as Senate again fails to advance stopgap funding bill. Live government shutdown. White House gives platform to conservative influencers to air grievances during Antifa roundtable. As it happened. U.S. Congress. The Guardian, music. I am a composer. Am I staring extinction in the face? Classical music and AI. Classical music. The Guardian, music. Name of actress is pronounced Saoirse Ronan to reportedly play Linda McCartney in Beatles biopic. The Beatles films. The Guardian, music. Nevada Vegas vignettes and killer karaoke staples. The Katy Perry greatest songs ranked. Katy Perry. The Guardian, music. Victoria Beckham review. Meticulously constructed but extremely boring television. The Guardian, nature. Creatures buried in soil for over a century burst back to life in Toronto waterfront. Toronto. The Guardian, Pennsylvania. Republicans reignite bid to unseat mega congressman. Pennsylvania. The Guardian, pets. Dogs ball junkie. Some dogs show signs of addiction. Study finds animal behavior. The Guardian, pets. Hero dog leads police to Florida woman 86 who had fallen while walking in Florida. The Guardian, RFK Jr. California RAWSEP view ultra-processed food ban brought first by Democrats stealing any thunder from RFK Jr. Healthy food is not a Republican issue. Distraction from RFK Jr. Denial of vaccines foiled by California Governor Gavin Newsom. From the article headline, California to become first U.S. state to phase out ultra-processed foods from school meals. California. The Guardian, RFK Jr. vaccine denial alarm as CDC calls for separate MMR vaccines despite measles outbreak. U.S. healthcare. The Guardian, security breach hack of age verification firm may have exposed 70,000 Discord users' ID photos. Social media. The Guardian, Supreme Court voting rights. The stakes are quite large. U.S. Supreme Court case could gut Voting Rights Act. U.S. voting rights. The Guardian, Texas court again pauses execution of man in shaken baby case. Texas. The Guardian, Trump Nobel fallout. Need I list all the reasons why Trump should not get a Nobel Peace Prize? Sidney Blumenthal. The Guardian, Trump Nobel fallout. Norway braces for the Trump reaction if he does not win Nobel Peace Prize. Nobel Peace Prize. The Guardian, Trump Nobel fallout. Truly, madly, deeply, the Trump desire for a Nobel Peace Prize is driving diplomacy. Donald Trump. The Guardian, voting machines dominion. Voting firm targeted by false 2020 election claims sold to new owner. U.S. politics. The Guardian, women access to abortion threatened by other people. Anti-abortion activists pardoned by Trump face trial for new clinic invasion. Pennsylvania. The Guardian, workplace problems. How authenticity at work can become a trap for people of color. Books. The Guardian, Brazil, Trump ally in prison. Past president Bolsonaro of Brazil was convicted, but the military appetite for a coup lingers. Brazil. The Guardian, Colombia. President Petro accuses U.S. of killing Colombians in attacks on narco boats. Colombia. The Guardian, Ireland, dance river dance. I absolutely went for it. Michael Flatley on sex swagger river dance and tapping his feet 35 times a second. Michael Flatley. The Guardian, United Kingdom Environmental Conference, which addresses air pollution emissions. RAWSEP view. Although wood-burning emissions are erased from climate goals for all nations in the world based on the scientifically debunked theory of carbon neutrality of wood burning, could COP30 in 2025 recognize mitigation of wood-burning emissions as part of climate goals? From the article headline, Prince William to attend COP30 UN Climate Summit in Brazil. COP30, The Guardian. Spain flight from the United States to Spain. Attempted U.S. anti-fascism expert blocked from flying to Spain. At airport. U.S. News. The Guardian. Israel-Gaza ceasefire plan live. Trump claims Israeli hostages should be released on Monday or Tuesday. Israel. It feels like a dream. Protests come to end as Israelis sing in hostages square. Israel. The Guardian. Saudi Arabia. Musk money talks. The deep ties between Twitter and Saudi Arabia. The Guardian. Saudi Arabia. U.S. comedians. A moral evil vitriolic backlash builds against comics who played Riyadh Festival comedy. The Guardian. Japan phones it made my day more meaningful. The Japanese Gen Z attempting a 2-hour limit on smartphone use. Japan. The Guardian headlines. The Guardian. October 8, 2025. Barry Weiss is a weird and worrisome choice as top editor for CBS News. Margaret Sullivan. The Guardian. California Democrats race for governor. Democratic frontrunner for California governor threatens to walk out of interview. California. The Guardian. California wildfire man charged with starting Palisades fire that killed 12 people. California wildfires. The Guardian. Government shutdown. Comedian Jimmy Kimmel on Trump. Why does he always sound like the dumbest member of the crime family? Late night TV roundup. The Guardian. Government shutdown. Comedian Jon Stewart on Democrats protecting healthcare and shut down the least they can do. Late night TV roundup. The Guardian. Government shutdown. Republicans. A right-wing late night show may have bombed, but the funding behind it is no laughing matter. Media. The Guardian. Government shutdown. Republican Kristi Noem compares Antifa to MS-13, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic State. Kristi Noem. The Guardian. Government shutdown. Supreme Court appears open to Republican challenge over Illinois mail-in ballot law. U.S. Supreme Court. The Guardian. Government shutdown. U.S. shutdown deadlock deepens as senators reject competing bills. U.S. federal government shutdown 2025. The Guardian. Government shutdown. U.S. Supreme Court hears arguments in lawsuit over Illinois mail-in ballots. U.S. Supreme Court. The Guardian. Journalism history cover-up review. The Laura Poitras Seymour Hersh documentary is a thrilling ode to journalism. Documentary films. The Guardian. Medicine. Do you grind your teeth at night? Here is what to do. Well, actually, The Guardian. Movie maintenance required review. The Amazon synthetic you have got male rip-off romance films. The Guardian. Music. The life of a showgirl is a massive hit and massively divisive. What should Taylor Swift do next? Taylor Swift. The Guardian. Trump appointees. RAWSEP view apparent corruption by money from fossil fuel interests. From the article headline, more than 40 Trump administration picks tied directly to oil, gas, and coal. Analysis shows Trump administration. The Guardian. Trump versus Democratic governors. Trump calls for jailing of Chicago mayor and Illinois governor as National Guard arrives in city. Chicago. The Guardian. Trump Epstein fallout. Democrat. Arizona. Hall. The senators press Mike Johnson to swear in Democrat who could force Epstein vote. House of Representatives. The Guardian. Trump Epstein fallout. Republicans government shut down Bondi spars over Epstein, but stays silent on Comey. Takeaways from a tense hearing. Pam Bondi. The Guardian. Trump lawsuits against personal enemies. Ex-FBI Director James Comey pleads not guilty on lying to Congress. Charge James Comey. The Guardian. Trump mispronunciations. If a 4-year-old can pronounce a name correctly, so can a politician. Arwa Madwi. The Guardian. Canada former climate minister on making a change. Aloof Trudeau and sexism. Environment. The Guardian. United Kingdom. The badinage thoughtful conservatism turns out to be just the slower road to Nigel Farage. Far-right Farage-ism. Raphael Baer. The Guardian. United Kingdom Environmental Conference, which addresses air pollution emissions. RAWSEP view, although wood-burning emissions are erased from climate goals for all nations in the world based on the scientifically debunked theory of carbon neutrality of wood burning. Could COP30 in 2025 recognize mitigation of wood-burning emissions as part of climate goals? From the article headline, The Guardian view on COP30. Starmer must stop havering and announce that he is going to Brazil. Editorial. The Guardian. United Kingdom. Israel. Why Tony Blair just cannot kick the habit of imperial interference in the Middle East. Oliver Eagleton. The Guardian. France. Outgoing French PM says path still exists to avoid snap elections. France. The Guardian. Germany ends fast-track citizenship as mood on migration shifts. Europe. The Guardian. Russia games Cold War power play. How the Stasi got into computer games. The Guardian. Israel. Gaza ceasefire talks live. Trump says Israel and Hamas have signed off on first phase of peace plan. Headlines. Other media. October 10, 2025. United States healthcare. 7 in 10 women are worried about the cost of medical bills. United States Republican Cindy McCain. 71 suffers stroke in Italy. Parade. United States. RAWSEP view. Vaccine disinformation and misinformation. From RFK Jr. is working to combat this misinformation. There is a university-linked organization called University of Minnesota Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. CIDRAP. From the article headline, New poll public confidence in CDC for vaccine advice tumbles. CIDRAP. California hospitals never seen before. Why are California hospitals closing? California healthcare. Kaiser Permanente lays off employees across California ahead of mass strike. KFF. Health News. Government shutdown. Judge denies Trump admin attempt to pause Medicaid case amid shutdown. Newsweek. Government shutdown. NIH leaders fired. CDC gets acting center directors. And Prasad shapes FDA team. MedPage. Today. Government shutdown starting to feel the shutdown bite. KFF. Health News. Government shutdown. Congress. House Republican Mike Johnson back pay guarantee. Government shutdown. Texas Republican Chip Roy calls for overhaul of all federal health programs. Medicine and health. The medicine of good, clean, and fair food. Medicine and science. While the most common heart attack signs. RFK Jr. vaccine denial. CDC panel announces plans to assess childhood vaccines. Politico. RFK Jr. lack of knowledge of medicine and science. Republicans. GOP senators urge RFK Jr. to crack down on medication. Abortion. RFK Jr. vaccine denial. Circumcision non-scientific link to autism with no evidence. RFK Jr. ties Tylenol use after circumcision to autism. KFF. Health News. Trump cuts rural access to internet. RAWSEP view. Trump actions denying service to rural areas can continue even during a government shutdown. From the article headline, Trump called Digital Equity Act racist. Now internet money for rural Americans is gone. KFF. Health News. Venezuela. Trump snubbed Nobel Peace Prize given to Venezuelan democracy activist Maria Corina Machado. The Times of Israel. Venezuela. What Nobel winner Maria Corina Machado said about Donald Trump. Newsweek. United Kingdom music. Victoria Beckham clarifies her moody reputation in documentary. Parade headlines. Other media. October 9, 2025. Climate loss. Science. Government shutdown. Congress. Senate. Democrat Schumer On the shutdown, every day gets better for us. Government shutdown, health coverage, outbreak care, and mosquito risks. United States Rural Health Radar, October 9th, 2025 headlines. Other media, October 8th, 2025 United States, be smoke-free and help your pets live longer, healthier lives. FDA Wisconsin conservationist former legislator Fred Clark announces run for 7th congressional seat. Wisconsin Examiner. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies, which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. RAWSEP view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions. Yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut down and burn tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.